first Polynesian colonists arrived 1,500 years ago, the island was thick with forests of palms. The palm trees gave them enough timber to build canoes, so they were able to fish way out to sea, and in the first centuries after their arrival, they were well fed. Their numbers grew. By the 10th century, there were enough of them to allow the people to indulge their taste for statuary and celebrate their great men with the huge stone statues. It seems that the first colonization, however, was something of a fluke. At any rate, no other colonists came from the Polynesian islands away to the west, and this extraordinary culture developed in its own amazing way in isolation. But one headland on the island supplies important evidence of the people's last cults and beliefs. I'm at the southwest corner of the island, on the top of a 1,000-foot-high cliff. And purely by chance, Captain Cook happened to have landed at a beach only a little way up the coast. And up here, there are the remains of 50-odd stone houses that were once a great ritual center. This is the sacred village of Orongo. Its site is dramatic indeed. From the few surviving traditions, we have some idea of the beliefs of those early Easter Islanders. Not surprisingly, for a people who were imprisoned in a tiny island thousands of miles away from anywhere, they worshipped birds that had such an enviable freedom of the skies. And in particular, judging from these carvings on the rocks, they worshipped the frigate bird that still has the freedom of these skies. They were perhaps the more mysterious, the more sacred, because the islanders never saw them come down from the skies. The frigates never nested on the island, and they got their food by stealing it from other birds in the air. No wonder the marooned islanders thought them magical and imbued with power. And among those carvings of supernatural birds, occasionally a staring mask with goggling eyes, which the islanders say represent the creator spirit, Makemake. Just offshore from Orongo lie 3 small rocky islets that were specially valuable to the people, for their boobies and terns regularly nested in considerable numbers. The birds arrived in September, and their appearance was a sign of the renewal of fertility, when fresh food, eggs, became available once more. Every year, each chief sponsored a youth in a race to collect the first egg. The youths swam across, supporting themselves on rafts of reeds, and the first to collect an egg swam back, carrying the egg in a headband. Daringly, he climbed up these huge cliffs. He raced up this slope, carrying the egg, and presented it to his sponsor, the great man who waited for him inside one of these huts. And as he presented the egg to him, so that great man became sacred, taboo. For the next year, he would live in seclusion. He wouldn't feed himself, that would be done by an attendant. He didn't cut his hair, he didn't cut his fingernails, which grew to an extraordinary length. He was the representative on earth of Makemake, the great creator god, the god of fertility. His clan now ruled for the next year, and he himself remained magically powerful for the rest of his life. When he died, his body was buried on a platform in his clan's territory, and a stone figure put up in his memory to stand alongside those of his predecessors. So he continued to gaze over the land that was once his and protect it with his mana, his supernatural power. Now the meaning of those elongated fingernails becomes clear. They were as he grew them during his year of sacred power. But that extraordinary culture didn't last, and this barren landscape explains why. As the numbers of people grew, so they started to cut down the forest that had once covered their island in order to make fields, in order to grow crops. When they cut down the last tree, they lost the timber to make ocean-going canoes. The people were marooned on their island. Nonetheless, their numbers continued to grow. Soon, they had far outstripped the land's capacity to feed them all, and faced with starvation, warfare broke out. One clan attacked another and overturned the great stone statues to which they thought their rivals owed their power. And by 1774, the population had reached the depths of poverty and wretchedness in which Cook found them. The past glories of their culture were eventually forgotten. Destitute and quarrelling among themselves over dwindling supplies of food, they no longer worked together in teams to carve and transport the giant stone statues. Perhaps by now they had even forgotten how to do so. Eventually, even the birdman ceremonies were abandoned. The cult houses up here at Orongo, where once the sacred chiefs had lived, surrounded by ritual and hidden from the eyes of the common people, now stood deserted.